Ask Redditors. Business owners of Reddit, what's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit had to be fired over? Please subscribe, leave a like, comment and share the video to help the channel. My dad and I ran a business together cleaning out foreclosed homes for a real estate agency as I was finishing high school. I was a senior, so I got out at lunchtime and we could usually get a house done in a half day. Sometimes we'd get some bad ones, and we had a few guys that we would call to see if they wanted to make a quick $100 for a day's work. On my literal last day of class, my dad picked up one of our usual guys and got one house about 90% done by lunch. He was a pretty normal guy that we had never had any trouble with. The guy we paid to help my dad went out to the truck and came back into that house with a gun and robbed my dad of his wallet and took his keys and left in our truck. Funny thing is, my dad only had the cash he was about to give him an hour later for finishing up the house. The state police got the guy's number from us and they told him some bogus story about how my dad was being investigated for not paying his workers, and if met them with the truck they would get his statement and let him go. Idiot pulls up and gets arrested on the spot. He got 8 years in prison. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company try and convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and they would undercut me by 10%. Learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. Employee had corporate card, charged a vacation, purse, fossil watch, takeout, along with overall being miserable to work with. Had laptop stolen within weeks of joining. Fired her, and a few days later a watch catalog from Fossil showed up at the office with her name on it. Had active court cases for all the theft. We had a young intern helping with some hardware inventory tasks. It wasn't uncommon for laptops not to make it back to us as projects would hoard them from terminated employees, but one day we noticed his backpack open and a laptop of model we used sticking out. Sent him to the other side of the building and checked the serial number, and yep, it was one he reported as missing during a recent inventory. Opportunistic theft is one thing, but bringing it back into the office every day, just wow. I'm not a business owner, but I'm a student manager. I don't really have the ability to fire someone, but I had to in this case. This one kid was trouble to say the least, and I asked him to go check the bathrooms to make sure they were clean/stocked. When he asked about the woman's room, I said just to knock and make sure nobody was inside. Apparently he banged on the door and screamed in his very deep voice, "Who in here? Everybody get out." He then entered the bathroom where a poor little elderly woman was inside the stall and continued to bang on the stall yelling, "Get out." He was yelling so loud I actually heard him and went to investigate. The poor woman was whimpering and calling the police, and he just was the kind of person who had no idea how he came across. There was many weird issues, but this obviously topped the cake, and I told him he was done and needed to go home. The poor old woman was so upset that she refused to leave the bathroom, and I had to call her son for her. Not a business owner, but at a previous job we had issues with food being stolen from the break room fridge. The company made a big stink about it, and it kept happening, so they very obviously installed security cameras in the break room. Like big fucking cameras in plain sight, pointing at the fridge, with our bosses being very direct about "There is the camera. You really want to lose your job over eating some own sandwich?" Few days later, guy gets fired for stealing food. Literally on camera, just grabbing people's lunch out of the fridge and eating it. Don't own a business, but work on employee claims and lawsuits. I've told this story on here before. A guy filed a discrimination complaint against the company after he got fired for stealing hot dogs from the refrigerator. This warehouse, big company, this was not at my location, kept a stock of hot dogs for employee appreciation picnics, usually weekly cookouts. No one knew why they were disappearing, so announcements were made and all employees were asked to not eat the hot dogs, and if they wanted some they could ask, but couldn't have several packs. That didn't work, so warnings were announced. Finally a camera was installed near the refrigerator, and he got caught red-handed. He was just practically inhaling the hot dogs directly from refrigerator by the packs. After he was fired, he filed a discrimination claim on the basis of disability due to his weight. I sent the response with a video of him eating the hot dogs. Also, he couldn't prove his weight was a disability under the ADA, and weight is not a protected class. We won that claim. My dad owned his own business working as a color corrector / editor. He had this one employee who had been there since day one and ended up becoming similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for 10 plus years and, just recently, he had to fire the assistant manager because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, that he's a terrible person, etc. Basically driving all business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out he was a narcissistic sociopath. My dad's just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. Had a guy on a location fake an injury. Now mind you, he did injure himself severely accidentally, but that wasn't his plan. His plan had been to fake a minor injury and get put on workers' comp. The problem was he screwed up how to do it and ended up hurting himself severely. You ask how? Did you know he was trying to fake injure himself? Well, that's very easy to explain. We had a 20-minute tape of him hiding behind one of the trucks on the worksite practicing his fall. Then a written confession from friends saying that he'd been planning it since the day we hired him. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3 to 4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his time and what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day he came back from lunch smelling like beer. I let him go on the spot. A few years later he showed up in my office asking for his old job back. He said that he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he is doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out. Mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatral at 10:30 p.m. She had keys to my building but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a foursome in one of my offices I had converted to a bedroom where I could crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-coitus and acted normal, albeit a little tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyways, and then mentioned to make sure she only was ever at the office between 700 am and 700 pm, since there was a silent alarm that would call me with audio of activities in the building. When I got back in town, her keys were sitting on my desk. The one that instantly jumps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of a call center training course because she wouldn't stop touching herself. Not sure how she got through our screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. Edit, since people requested details. It was really somewhat sad. She was late 30s, early 40s, and I don't think this was an employment scam or anything of the like, and more likely just a mental compulsion or drugs. It was really not that subtle, but done under a shawl / scarf thing draped over her lap. Politely and quietly asked to stop by the trainer, then stopped momentarily, but started up again 15 to 20 minutes later. Oblig, I'm not the business owner as well. It was a multinational corp, but really they don't get the best stories anyway. I regret nothing. I worked for a boutique hotel, you know, small, cute, expensive AF, as an ops manager. Basically, unless the area manager had to come in, I was the law. I get a frantic call on my downtime from an employee claiming our overpass guy tried to assault him. I have a sigh, as the guy freaking out is notorious for being a drama queen. I load up the security camera on my home PC, go to the time frame, and holy shit. Our night guy legitimately lunged at his coworker and tried to strangle him. Luckily a desk was between them, and that gave the victim time to bolt. Instantly felt like a dick for doubting him. Well, this is when I call in the area manager. We show up at the ass crack of dawn and speak with the dude who made the attack, and he claims he didn't do it. We show him the video, and I shit you not, he responds with, I don't recall the events of that evening. We fired him on the spot. What started the fight, you ask? Well, the victim had done extra work to make the attacker's shift easier. The attacker felt like this was an insult to his work ethic. Oh, and I got multiple reference requests from similar hotels asking for a good reference. I simply said I wasn't able to provide a positive reference, as legally that was all I could say. Pawn shop employee stole $400 from the cash register, then realized that there were video cameras. He had no idea where the security footage was stored, so in order to cover his tracks he set the store on fire. He actually ended up getting pretty badly burned in the process and went to jail right after the hospital. Not my business but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damage as the cars left the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad, as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day one of the supervisors for the car lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. Supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. Dude was instantly fired. Please subscribe, leave a like, comment and share the video to help the channel.